think we're basically ready to introduce Keith. My wife and I have been longtime students of Keith. We've both had the opportunity to spend time with him out in Washington State. And not only that, we've had the opportunity to host him at our home. Before we allowed him to get a hotel room, we insisted that he stay at our home. And I can just tell you that my kids were sorry that he opted for the hotel, but they enjoyed him. Let me tell you, to watch my 2-year-old hang out with this 6'4", gentle giant. I think she got lost in your shoe one time, right? Wasn't that true? She got lost in his shoe. But it's a treat to see Keith and to be able to revisit his, just his warmth, his love for people, his understanding, and really, to me, what motivates that warm and loving feeling is his understanding of how we're all kind of connected to something simple and profound, and that we're all kind of in this together and all part of this. And to me, that's one of the reasons why it makes sense that he enjoys hanging out with my 2-year-old and my other kids, and he just so enjoys being at this conference. It's obvious that he enjoys being here, and we're very excited to be able to have him again. So without further ado, you've got till, what do you have till? 3:15, I think? 2:15. 2:15. And Keith, there were some people who asked if he could stand up, but he says that he's a little too old to stand up. So he's going to hang out right there, but he'll talk loud. Okay, without further ado.
Yeah. Is it 2:15? Yeah. It's 35. It's okay.
40. No,
okay.
So you go a few minutes after.
All right. Is it on? Yeah. Oh, it's on. Hi. Henry's talking about his daughter. When she was 2. About 2, I think, she would just, I would ask her questions. She was so sweet. I think they should have a race of children that just remained about 2 years old, about a year and a half to 2. Yes, but you've grown up. You're in a big body. I like this little innocence, she would just turn away and just be, she was so shy and she was so sweet. Oh my gosh, it was just a pleasure staying with your family and enjoying your children. It was wonderful. Thank you, Sephora, too. You're out here somewhere. Oh, there she is in the back. Yeah, that was. It's always a pleasure to spend time with your family and with you and your family. And thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to come. I've been here regularly, and I've always appreciated it. It's a great, fond experience for me. I see many familiar faces and people that I've talked to and people that I'm just getting to meet, so it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I wanted to talk about something that's remarkably simple, yet enduringly provocative and interesting and evolutionary. It has evolutionary implications for us all. There's a law, there's a pre-existing law about how we all function, and we've discovered this law. Well, actually, we didn't discover it. Sidney Banks isolated this. I don't know if you've heard his name yet, but if you haven't, he was a very interesting story in and of himself. An undereducated man, a welder, and an immigrant, and adopted, and he had this occasion where, when he was 43 years old, and this was 1973. I think Terry mentioned that. Someone mentioned to him, he was complaining to a friend, an acquaintance, I should say, that he was insecure. And the acquaintance said to him, well, you're not insecure, you just think you're insecure. And for some reason, the power, the truth of that just penetrated him profoundly. And it shocked him, like that, the wisdom of it. And he said to the man, "Do you have any idea what you just said?" Because to Sid, it meant literally the answer to worldwide insecurity just came out of this man's mouth. And he heard it so deeply, so profoundly. And when he said this back to this man, do you realize what you just said? The man gets insecure, which is interesting if you think about it. Here's the answer to worldwide insecurity. In the next breath, he gets insecure. So Sid could see that he said something true, but he didn't really know it. But Sid knew it. It profoundly affected him. And he entered a state of kind of revelation. He didn't really sleep for, he says he didn't sleep much for the next 3 nights. He was just in a state of constant revelation, constant, profound changes, that all of his fears, all of his childhood memories, all the traumas, all the things that ever happened to him just disappeared. He said it disappeared like the morning mist disappears before the sun. It just faded away. Insight after insight after insight. Then he went to visit his mother-in-law's, and his mother-in-law and his wife were complaining about Sid being so happy the past 3 days. And which it struck him as odd, that and he could hear what they were complaining about, and he realized they just had it was like, I mean, and this is just my interpretation, but it was like he had won the lottery or something, and they were complaining about 5 cents more that they're paying for milk at the grocery or something. It just made no sense. And so he couldn't help but chuckle. And his mother-in-law and Sid, up until this very moment, really didn't like one another. And she came around the corner of into the living room and said, "May I ask you what's so funny?" And he looked at his wife and he thought, "Oh, I'm in big trouble because I've got 2 women who are angry at me and upset with me for being so happy, And he didn't know what to say. So he looked out the window, and when he looked out the window, then an even greater, profound, enlightening experience occurred to him. And he said, I felt like I was sucked down a tunnel of white light. It was very profound. He said, no one could see the light in the room but me. It was buzzing, buzzing, buzzing white light. And he said, the first thing I knew was the true nature of God. I just knew it. He said, then I turned to my wife and I said, I'm home, I'm free, I've conquered this world. And this means to say that you and I will be traveling around the world. We're going to change, what I realized is going to change psychology and psychiatry of the world. And millions and millions of people will be healed. Well, that's why we're here. Whatever happened to him and what he taught and how we heard about it, my wife and I were very fortunate to hear about it. And we went to talk to him. We heard about him, and he lived many thousands of miles from us, but we found our way. And we could see that something profound had happened to him, and he had a lot of great wisdoms and things to tell us and talk about. And that was 40 years ago. And here I am still talking about what I've learned, and I'm still learning more and more and more about what I've learned. And one of the things along the way is this partial topic of what I was asked to talk about today. And that is the truth. He discovered, you could say, a psychologic, that there's a logic a profound logic. And when I say logic, I don't mean something intellectual. I don't mean something analytical. I mean something profoundly true. One of the great definitions of logic that I've heard is that logic is not a body of knowledge. Logic is not a body of doctrine. It is a mirror image of the world, how it actually exists. That's the logic. And its logic is transcendental. So there was a transcendental logic that's true, that we're all subject to, but I had no idea. I had no idea that this was a logic that I was subject to and that you were subject to. Yeah, subject to in a really wonderful way, because it underlies our freedom and our responsibility for the way we feel, and that no one can make us feel anything without our thinking being involved, that our thought and feeling are the same, and that we don't often see that, we don't often know that, but sometimes we do. If you look in your life and you'll see there's been occasions and moments, maybe even many moments, where you've realized that you are one with how this works. There's a way in which you work, and you were in sync with it. And when you're like that, you feel safe, and you feel secure, and you feel at peace. As I've learned this myself, I've become a nicer and nicer and more peaceful person. It's not to say that I am always that way, but I've gotten better and better and better. There's been a steady change in me over the years. If you talk to my friends, I think they would say the same thing. Now, I don't take credit for that. This logic keeps proving itself to me. And I want to talk a little bit, I want to break this logic down a little bit to show you some really cool things about it. One of the things that's happening and it's probably happening for many, many people in this room, but I'm going to try to describe it, and that is that when you see there's this truth that your feeling is a manifestation, a product of your use of thought in the moment. You'll never think love and feel hate. You'll never think hate and feel love. They're always in a perfect coordination. Your experience, the feeling, when I say the feeling, I mean the feeling state, the state of mind, the experience, your attitude is always a representation of your use of the power of thought. Now thought is not, I'm not trying to say what you should think, but I'm just commenting, describing the nature of the experience of your thought. And in fact, we are all living in the experience of our thought, birth to death. That's what we're experiencing. You're experiencing it right now. You always have been, and you will continue. One of my students called it, recently called it my rigorous friend. Meaning rigorous, mean he can't get away from it. It's always going to show up as his feelings are always going to show up as his use of thought. Now, when I say the use of thought, I don't mean that you should think positive or you should think negative or you should think high or you should think low or you shouldn't think critical or you shouldn't think non-critical. I'm not trying to recommend any type of thought or any way to think. I'm talking about the power of thought. Your power of thought is a neutral power, and you put your ideas into it, and you feel accordingly. And that's always going on, constantly. And Sid Banks described this, the nature of this. And it took me, I'm a psychologist, so it took me a long time to see that, and I ask a lot of questions about this, but I started to see there was something about in the moment. There's only one place in time that people can see their feeling being created via thought. And it's not in the past or the future. It's always only in the present moment. In the present moment, you can see what your thinking is doing because your feeling is showing you. And there's going to be a lot of feeling that you don't think is good for you, or feeling, you're going to have worried feeling, or fearful feeling, or jealous feeling, or judgmental feeling, or angry feeling, or grief feeling, or you're going to have all the feelings that people have are available to you, and you're going to, and if you think those feelings, you'll have them. That is not a problem. It's not a problem, because there's a law about how that works. And if there's a law about how it works, it's not corruptible by you. You can't change it. It's changeless. It's God. You could say it's God's law. It's God's law of your mind. There's a mindful nature. There's a godly mindful nature to my experience and to your experience and to everyone's experience. It works through thought to create feeling. Now, this is really cool. And the reason I say it's really cool is because there's a lot of beliefs around, well, you got to have positive thought, or you got to have a positive feeling, or you can't have negative thought, you can't have judgmental thought. There's a lot of recommendations on the quality of thought, how to have right thought, how to not have wrong thought. This is deeper. This isn't taking that position this is just pointing up a simple mechanism about the fact that you're living in the feeling of your thinking. And it's really cool because I had no idea. Like I met Sidney Banks 40 years ago, and until about 10 or 12 years ago now, I was, when I would give talks to the public, as I've been doing for many years, I would always get questions, and the questions would essentially revolve around how do you do it? How do you get the kind of experience you want to have and not have the kind of experience you don't want to have? There were what we would call how-to questions. So when you'd stop, there'd be 15 hands go up, and each one of them, if you could listen, there was a how-to in there. Now, I noticed when I started thinking about the rigor of how this works, and I saw deeper into it, and I had an insight about it, and I realized that there was telling someone what to do, or someone asking about what to do, was just a symptom that they hadn't really heard that it's a done deal, that the feeling you're feeling has already been thunk, right? So you think the feeling and you feel it, and then you think another feeling and you feel that, and you think another feeling and you feel that. And people that were asking, how do you do it, were not really understanding that that's just the way it works. There isn't anything to do about that. That's the way, there's a way in which you work, and me too. And if you if you have anyone to complain to about the feeling you're feeling, you might ask yourself, what do you think it? like, because I can't really intercede on your behalf to tell you how to change your mind. Like, that's kind of your department. I can describe for you how that works, and that's profoundly helpful. And here's why it is helpful. Because there's a lot of feeling that people feel, me too, there's a lot of feeling that I feel, and I don't realize it's thought. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot of feeling people feel that they don't realize is created via their own thought. Their own use of the power of thought is the cause of their feeling, but it doesn't look like that. What does it look like? It looks like you made me mad. You upset me. The news frightened me. What happened to me in my circumstances, in my situation, that did it. There's a way in which we abdicate our responsibility for our own feeling, and what do? We blame it on something other than thought in the moment. And that's where we get into psychological trouble. We deny the law, we deny how it works, and we want it to work differently than it actually does. And we want other people we feel at the mercy of other people causing our feeling to be what it is, or other situations or circumstances. So I call that outside in. Outside in is an illusion. It's a paradigm, but it's not the true paradigm. So it's really hogwash, really. There's mythologies in our culture wherein people don't see how this works in the moment, and it looks to them like they're being caused to worry or be afraid or be jealous or angry or whatever because of something other than their jealous, angry thought in the moment. And when they believe that, which is not true, they're going to suffer. And because they have the wrong paradigm, they have the wrong target, they have the wrong logic. They're illogical. Me too. When I'm outside in, and you too, when you're outside in, you're illogical. And when you can see in the moment that you are illogical, that your feeling is coming from thought in the moment and not coming from what you're thinking about, every time you see that, it's so cool, because your unconscious thinking that's causing this pain and suffering gets revealed to you. And when it does, you'll be alleviated of your suffering. And you will evolve, you'll change, because you've realigned yourself with this logic. And that's very cool. It's cool in the sense that you can live your life with more grace and ease, and getting over yourself and getting over your shortcomings, or you're going to have them, they're going to show up, and you're going to suffer. But the question then becomes, where do you think your feeling is coming from? That's a question I hope you could entertain. We have some, which by the way, my colleagues and I, my wife and I, have created a website that we just put it up. So this is kind of the first time we're getting in to announce it. 3principlesparadigm.com, and we've got some wonderful articles on there that talk about this. One of the articles is entitled "The Inseparable Nature of Thought and Feeling." And if something is inseparable, then you can't break it. You can't change that. It's something that's a principle. It's a God-given nature to it, and it's unbreakable. But you can think you don't like it. You can think that you want it to be another way. You can think that you're being made to feel something that you don't think. That will make you unstable, and it makes me unstable. And it's not pretty, but it is illogical. So these principles, mind, thought, and consciousness, are the ultimate psychologic, and they're always at work. Throughout all of history, they've been at work, but they haven't really been fully, completely, simply understood and described. So when for example, we all know Newton discovered gravity, right? I'm in the 5th grade, I'm studying gravity, and I thought to myself, how smart could Newton have been? I mean, and I was thinking in my 5th grade mentality, you drop something, it goes to the floor. I mean, that means he's a genius. I could see that. Hadn't they noticed that until the 1500s? Well, they had noticed that. That had been common knowledge. When you drop things, it goes to the center of the earth. But what they didn't know, you know what Newton proved? He proved why the moon didn't fall. That's what he actually proved. Because they said, well, look, things fall to the earth, you drop them, then why doesn't the moon fall? It's right up there. So you know what the answer was? The moon is special, different. In fact, all the heavens are all different than the earth. The earth is unique and special and absolutely different, fundamentally different. So the moon didn't fall because it didn't have to. It was made out of tinsel or some sort of, I know, you're going to say cheese, right? I see Henry, cheese, yeah. So it was made out of something, but it must have been very lightweight cheese, right? Well, it wasn't made out of cheese, as we now know, but what Newton did was, it wasn't the apple that fell out of the tree that made him realize gravity. He did a thought experiment, and he imagined shooting a cannon off a mountain, and it would go halfway down the mountain. Then he imagined, well, let's say I put more powder in it, and it would go to the base of the mountain. Well, then let's say I put a whole bunch more powder in it and made a really long muzzle and pointed it straight up and fired it. It would go just like these others made to go here and here. This third one would be made to go around. So he realized the moon was held up there in orbit because of the way things fall to the earth. It was up there because of gravity. It wasn't a disproof of gravity. It was a demonstration of gravity. So it was a principle. When it was seen as a principle, it unified heaven and earth. And these principles here that we're talking about will unify us with one another and with God, with how God works, through our mind and through our consciousness and through our thought, and it will take away the mess, the emotional, hateful, angry, jealous, warlike, suffering mess that we all unnecessarily perpetrate upon ourselves and therefore each other. It'll change our behavior. It'll change our feeling. It's changing my feeling. I bet you if like show of hands, anyone in here who would say learning about these principles has in general changed their feeling? Give a show of hands. That's 60% of the room already knows what I'm talking about, and the rest of you are soon going to see it yourself, I bet, because you'll catch yourself. Terry mentioned it this morning. Like I caught myself the other day. I was grinding on something. Somebody said something and it's going to hurt my business, and I didn't like it, and why did they do this, and why are they in such trouble, and da-da-da-da-da, and so I'm grinding away, suffering, thinking that was creating my suffering, and quite committed to the source of it being what the other guy did and what the other people, what's the matter with them, what's the matter you, and and then I saw it, like all of a sudden, it's like out of the corner of my eye, I realized, oh yeah, wait, where's this feeling coming from? Wait a minute. Because I mean, this person and what they did wasn't in the room with me. I just heard that they said something in Europe somewhere about my business, and here I am, and like all of a sudden it just looked ridiculous to me that I was suffering at my own hand. You see what I mean? Like I was feeling bad, but the insight that was coming from my use of thought in the moment, that's where it all comes from. That's the law. It burst my bubble. It stuck a pin in that balloon, and what it did is it just went, and then I thought, well, okay, people say things, what am I going to be the police and try to control what everyone thinks and says about me all over the world and gotta do, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do about that? I could do something. I could make a call, but I could think so much more logically about it. Whereas before, I was thinking outside in about it, and I was troubled. And my trouble didn't have to do with me. My trouble had to do, and furthermore, it didn't have to do with my thinking. It had to do with something other than my troubled thinking. And that's a lie. It's a lie, and don't you believe it. I can say don't believe it, but I know you will when you're feeling it. But if you can see, or I know you can see, you've had insights. One of the things that Sid Banks said, an insight is when the ego collapses on a particular subject. That's what happened to me the other day. I was grinding, victim, hurt, angry, fearful, gonna hurt my business, gonna be a big trouble for me. What's the matter with them? It's like having mental indigestion, and it's not pretty. And I was suffering. I was literally suffering. So this is not the end of suffering. It's just the end of your lifelong commitment to it. Your lifelong justification. The justifications for your suffering are going to start leaving you. Because when you justify your suffering, you know what happens? It has babies. A lot of them, fast. It's like rabbits. I mean, they just multiply and multiply, and then you got more things to think about, and more hurts to suffer, and more injury to get over. And you try to help yourself, and you try to get out of it, but you can't get out of it. You know why? Because you're too late. You're too late. You've already sunk the thought that you hate what happened, and you're feeling that feeling as you always must because you thought the thought. And you're too late. You're already lost in your own creation. But there's a remedy. There's a remedy when you see it that will free you from the misunderstanding that feeling is not coming from your thinking. It is. When you get an insight about that, I would say I guarantee when you see where your feeling is actually coming from, your mental sickness is over. And you can go right back to it and dig it right back up again and do it all over again. But if you're any wiser by what happened, you'll see that you're doing that again. Now, sometimes things really are hard for you to get over, right? You know those things. They seem to have enduring pain. It could be anything. But even there then, those pains are not visited upon you by God or by any other force other than your own misunderstanding about where your feeling is coming from. And you have to do, in that case, if you have long time grudges or hurts or pains that you've had maybe your whole life, and maybe how someone treated you when you were young, or some deep insult or deep injury or deep trauma, those two are subject to healing. But you have to kind of get steely about these principles and how they work. They only work one way, and the way you feel is coming from the way you think. No exceptions. Now, in one of the writings that Sid Banks wrote, he said you have to. He called it a spiritual mind treatment, and it's just like a logic. There's a logic about how you're feeling what you're feeling in the moment through thought. And if it's painful, and it's not, it doesn't look like to you that you can tell you haven't really gotten over it. You have to really, almost like, really take God's gift to you, and be strong about it. That if He gave you, or if God has given you this gift of thought to use as you will, and you're suffering from your own thinking, and you know it, then you know that you could, if you could see that suffering feeling was coming from your outside-in thinking, which it is, I promise you it is, you're on the road to even having that heal. You're not condemned to suffer past injuries, past hurts, past insults, past guilts. The system isn't set up. The system is set up that you would suffer it, but that's because of your innocent putting thought in there that is injurious to yourself. And all you have to do is quit blaming anything other than thought. It's thought that makes you suffer. And if you see it as thought, and you hold true to that, to the truth of that, I promise you, you will heal. And a little one, or a medium-sized one, or a big one, or even a really chronic old one, you are not made to live this life. You're given the power of thought, but what you do, if you understand how that works, you're going to those misunderstandings will drop away. You won't have to fight them away. You don't have to wrestle them to the ground and make them say uncle. God will take them away. God will take them away for you, because they're not perpetrated by the world. The world has not perpetrated anything upon you that you don't deserve. You have the chance to change your mind, and you're never too old for that. Okay. I see my time is up. So thank you very much.